The next little sequence we're going to go into is what it says on my list as the IXIA test sequence. And this is where we hand over to Arthur to put it, just to give us the context.
All right, so now we are talking about all those interesting and innovative services you can very quickly deploy. But when you are looking how to go from the dangerous demo to the production environment, you need some assurance. You need some help to build this assurance internally when you would like to deploy those services in your network. So we are working with network operators on one hand, on the other hand with the developers and companies working on those new innovative services and providing them tools and means to build this kind of assurance. So we'll now, Michael will present the way how you can take model for you as a developer or company create for your new service, and then validate this model using traditional vendor tools. So in this case, this is the IXIA, which is well-known player in the network testing domain. So you can utilize those testing appliances, virtual appliances or physical appliances, to validate and understand the model you build for those services. Some example of those services you saw before, you will see also more later on. So, Michael?
Great. No, this one's on. Thanks. Hello again. So I'm going to walk you through a small presentation just on the scenarios to make sure everyone can understand what we're talking about. Over the last couple of years, we've actually seen in dangerous demos. Last year, we deployed IMS cores. We loaded up with almost 100,000 users. Also during that time, DataArt had conducted a demo where we, using microservices, created a conferencing system and then loaded up with approximately 2 million calls and scaled up in under about 30 seconds using a microservices architecture, as well as being able to scale down. And talking about dangerous demos, these are wonderful things, but when we're starting about putting things into production and growing up, as we talked about it internally in producing this, the next part about it, anyone's going to put something into wide-scale use, is actually figuring out a good way to test it. So after it's been instantiated and configured, verify it, and then ongoing continuous verification and integration into business support systems, the BSSs of the world. And this is whether you're a carrier or whether you're a large enterprise. These things are very important. So what I'm going to walk you through a couple things today. Over on the table over there is a black box. It's actually a company called IXIA, and they were kind enough to lend it to us for the demo today. And on there, what we've done in a NFV scenario, network function virtualization, commonly found in the carriers moving towards deployment, is a way to actually test these systems once they're deployed on an industrial scale and a production level scale. We have a couple different scenarios. I'm going to stick with one today, and I'll walk you through them. A little bit about DataArt. Before, when I came up and gave the business example, skipped right over this. So we are a global technology and consulting firm. We help organizations, enterprises, either deliver projects, deliver software. We're not a product company on our own. We have 17 offices globally, and it keeps growing and changing, but around, I'll say, 2,300 developers and consultants on staff globally. And been in business for about 20 years. I run the telecom division of it, and we have different industrial practices like banking, finance, healthcare, media. So what we're doing is we talked a little bit about showing voice over LTE here. Well, if you're going to deployment, and I think I heard someone make a joke, there's 2 people using it, but one of the impediments to that is actually being able to test and verify, because one of the biggest features of it is different classes of services and quality QoS that's put into it. So IXIA has a product, and also they have these what's called security black books. And so what we did in working with them was took a test right out of their black book. These black books are downloadable from their website if people are interested. And this is how you should do voice over LTE testing. And we're going to actually go through and show, not this one, but the IMS testing in a second. And the idea is you get customer experience out of it. You can just start understanding what your infrastructure can actually handle. And again, on their box, we have an environment that's set up and we'll actually go through and actually do this test. As a generic VNF manager, actually, again, before we run out, just could you kick off the test? Are you going to do it? Okay. So it takes a few minutes. So in the background, I'm just going to have them kick off the test so we won't have to wait for that as we're going through it. We're using Canonical's JUJU environment as a generic VNF manager to control this. And what you're seeing is that we're going to go through and actually be able to deploy the software under test, deploy the test system, execute a test, and retrieve the results. Obviously, this plugs into a wider context of things like Mano and network element managers. But the idea is that this now scales, and in any environment that is using JUJU as a VNF manager, these tests can be brought in. Right. And so we can see is that as we deploy tests in the visual modeling tool, we go from a bunch of disconnected pieces. I don't know if the lines are very visible up there, but using relationships where we're saying these are the parts are connected, and that's what JUJU is doing, actually going through, doing the configuration, and starting the test. So imagine if you're trying to deploy carrier class testing, or if you're trying to deploy large enterprise testing, it's one thing to just get the software out there, it's another thing to configure it, and it's another thing to keep it up and running and modeled to your environment. And so we like this, that it actually makes it, yeah, please go ahead and kick it off. It makes it much easier to implement the tests and continue to run the tests as you go forward with this. So the three scenarios that we implemented for IXIA, so as I mentioned, there's a voice over LTE quality test. There is a using Metaswitch and IMS core testing, volume testing, and a firewall testing scenario. And those are all present on here. In the interest of time, we'll just skip with one and talk about and show the results. At the output of it, what we're looking at is you get a very straightforward report, right? How did your environment actually function? Did it load properly? Do you think it handled the proper load on it? And then what was the quality degradation that goes over it? And certainly some people in here are going to be familiar with open source tools like SIP, and there are lots of other test tools that are out there. With IXIA, you get, I will say that what we like about using them, it's a very comprehensive system, and they have those black books in their test scenarios, lots of them that are very applicable to very complex and diverse environments. So you can configure their systems to do lots of different types of tests and record lots of different types of metrics. So enough on the presentation. So is it running, or is it almost still going? Still in progress. We'll pull up a little bit. So let's take a look in the environment. So running over there on that box again is a complete OpenStack cloud managed by JUJU, as we mentioned. So you can see lots of different networks that are going through it. Let's see which one's over here. So this is an example of the firewall configuration test. Try to bring it in so you can see the complexity that eventually gets involved. All right, so sorry for the size on it, but the idea is that there's lots of components if you're going to be deploying a firewall, and the firewall in this case could be a private service, can be virtual CPE equipment that's going through, and then configuring the test points and actually running it. So it's not just simply deploying a piece of code and running against the firewall. So here's a scenario, and this is what it looks like to get it done. Over here, we're looking at Metaswitch's IMS. So the Metaswitch's IMS core there's one version of it already available as a charm, so it's easy to deploy via JUJU in the environment, and you get a complete functioning IMS core out of it. And it's going. Here again, we have a more environment where we also have telestacks involved. Where we're using the IMS core and we're using telestacks as the SIP-AS. So that's where the application server is. And so we can run the tests environment over this. Is it finished? Still running? Try not to get that dead time. I'll show you previous results. I think I think A result's just fine. All right. I'm still running that test. Hold on. So yeah, and this is a test we ran a few days ago, but goes through, gives you information. There's a summary dashboard that we looked for, right? So you can see your average model scores, as well as key performance indicators, number of SIP channels that are handling it. So pretty standard test metrics that you've seen. Again, the concept here is that we're able to use JUJU to deploy it, the entire environment, so we can deploy either just the test, or we can actually deploy the environment under test as well, run the tests and collect them. So again, the resolution on this is not great to see everything, but just walk you through everything. So again, the important point is once you manage to deploy all this great technology, you got to have a way to manage and monitor it going forward to put it in production.
There we have it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for that, Michael. Very worthy test demonstration.